weather, 74 for a high with a few clouds today. Then more clouds tomorrow with a high of 69. Sunny and warmer Thursday and Friday. Right now, sunny and 66. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources.
Inside Sources.
America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson.
On Utah's home for elevated conversation.
Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The majority of the whole number of votes cast by surname, a speaker has not been elected.
That was a little earlier today. That was the Speaker Pro Tem Patrick McHenry declaring that no one had reached the 217 votes required to become the Speaker of the House. It's a busy day on Capitol Hill as Congress has gathered and convened. Everyone goes into the chamber to cast their votes by voice vote. It is a very slow process, and at the end of round number one, as you just heard, Patrick McHenry declaring no speaker has been chosen. So the question behind the headlines is, now what? What comes next? Will they get a speaker today? And will the urgent business of the country get done? Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
So as we look at all the things that are happening in our nation's capital today, so many pressing issues as we watch what continues to unfold in Israel and Gaza, as we watch the countdown clock continue to fund the government before November the 17th, as we continue to see the challenges in Ukraine, the aggression of Russia, the manipulation and things that are happening from China, North Korea, and Iran. There's a lot going on in the world, and the House of Representatives is not being part of that conversation. And so that's the purpose of the day, is to get a Speaker of the House so that the work of the people, the People's House, can actually move forward and get done. So if you're just tuning in today, I want to go back just a little bit and look at the layout, how this proceeded today, and then where we are and what we expect to come next. So you can kind of watch without having to chase all of the big headlines, to chase all of the clickbait kinds of things I'm sure you're getting already on your social media feeds, as well as in your email box and probably on your cell phone as well. All of them asking you for money, by the way. But we're going to break all of that down in terms of what are the real questions we should be asking, what's the real path forward, and what are we likely to see as the day marches on. So let's begin where the day began, and that's with New York Representative Elise Stefanik, who praised the record of Representative Jim Jordan and formally nominated him to be the Speaker of the House.
Jim Jordan will be We the People Speaker. Our friend and colleague Jim Jordan is a patriot. He is an America First warrior who wins the toughest of fights, going after corruption and delivering accountability at the highest levels of government on behalf of we the people. Jim is the voice of the American people who have felt voiceless for far too long.
Going to go back to that idea of fighting for the people, a bit of that populist message coming through in the nomination of Jim Jordan. And it's something that I think will continue to play out, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. On the other side of the aisle, of course, California Representative Pete Aguilar nominated House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries to be the Speaker. He framed Jeffries as the path away from extremism and back to governance.
To fulfill our obligations to the American people, we have no choice today but to vote for a leader of both character and conviction. When the Congress first began, we proudly stood next to him as our leader and made a promise to every American. House Democrats would work to find common ground on the issues that matter most whenever possible. That we would stand up to extremism whenever necessary. Only Hakeem Jeffries can be trusted to keep his word. Only Hakeem Jeffries can lead us out of the chaos and towards a path of governance.
So there you have the two nominating speeches, one for Jim Jordan, one for Hakeem Jeffries. And as we've noted, in the first round of voting, Hakeem Jeffries actually tallied more votes than Jim Jordan did. But this was also very similar to where Kevin McCarthy was back in January of this year as he mounted his effort to become the Speaker of the House. Of course, that took 15 rounds back in January for that to get done. And so really no surprises of big significance in terms of that first round of voting. And no one achieved that 217 number. But the battle lines are clearly drawn. The Democrats are going to continue to be lockstep in terms of saying, hey, this is the Republicans' problem to sort out. We're going to stay with our leader. No one's going to cross the aisle. No bipartisan votes. They're just going to strictly vote for Hakeem Jeffries each and every time. So that number for Hakeem Jeffries won't really fluctuate as the day goes on. The interesting thing to me, I think, is in Representative Stefanik's praise of Jim Jordan in her nominating speech. She actually hit on something that's kind of interesting. There's actually, when it comes to the voters actually are a little closer to Jim Jordan than they were to either Steve Scalise or to Kevin McCarthy. His popularity amongst the Republican voters is much higher than either McCarthy or Scalise. And so that's always an interesting thing to see what happens next. Do those representatives follow their constituents, or do they kind of mark their own path and continue to play this out in the way it's been going over the last several weeks? Interestingly, after the vote was taken, former Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy told reporters that Jim Jordan is in precisely the same situation that McCarthy found himself after the first round of voting in January.
Jordan has just as many votes as I had on the first round. I think the difference here, too, is we have rules so we can sit down, talk to the other members, and be able to move forward.
Again, that was Kevin McCarthy. McCarthy was also asked whether or not they'd go right into a second round of voting or how that might play out. Here was his response.
No. You got to understand the difference between when we opened up and today. Now we have rules. We don't have to be stuck on the floor. The interesting part of why we're here, every single Democrat voted to stop one branch of government. They created this mess with 8 Republicans. Every single Democrat did that. And so I think what we'll do is we'll go sit down. We'll talk to those that have difference of opinion and come back.
So Kevin McCarthy saying, look, we're just going to sit down and we're going to talk this through. And he knows the drill because he's done it. It took him 15 rounds to get the gavel. I'm sure he is part of the behind-the-scenes conversations that are going on. So if you look at the breakdown of how those votes came through, there were 7 votes from the Republicans that went to Kevin McCarthy. There were also 7 votes that went to Steve Scalise. And then there were 4 other votes that went other places, and we won't get into all of those other people. But so the numbers are not huge numbers for Jim Jordan to come over, especially because 14 of them come out of people who probably in a show of either loyalty or protest cast their vote in the first round for Kevin McCarthy or Steve Scalise. That would make it very close if all of those decided that they'd done their protests or they've done their loyalty pledge and now they can move on and vote for Jim Jordan in round number 2. So after the vote, Jim Jordan was pressed in the hallway. This was actually just moments before the vote. Talked about how many rounds of voting he was willing to go through to get the gavel.
How many ballots are you willing to go? Will you do as much as Kevin McCarthy?
We need to get a speaker today, and we feel really good about where we're at.
I'm
going over to meet with.
Does that mean ballot after ballot the way McCarthy did?
Whatever it takes to get a speaker today.
So Jim Jordan saying, hey, we're going to press and see if we cannot get a speaker today so that the work of the people in the People's House can actually get done. So there's a lot of things happening there. There's a lot of moving parts. Keeping on the cell phone and texting with a wide variety of members from across the country and across the spectrum, many of which are in the rooms where a lot of this is happening and this negotiation is going on. And so we're going to continue to do that. The important thing is to just remember there's one vote has been done. They are in recess currently. They will come back likely within an hour, I am guessing and anticipating, and then they will go through this process again for round number 2. Round number 2, I think, will be more significant and more telling in terms of the progress that Mr. Jordan can make either towards becoming, or if he starts to lose additional votes, then the conversation will shift very significantly. But the important thing is to watch the process. Don't follow the wild swings or the fundraising emails coming at you. Just look for the principles in the process, and ultimately it'll help you figure out where we're headed from here. We'll be right back.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. At times like this,
some Utahns are stuck in Gaza as this war intensifies.
When hearts are breaking,
I think everyone is deeply saddened by what's going on.
We go out of our way to talk about what happened with compassion.
Many in both groups are united in grief over the tragic situation.
Get breaking news with Tim and Amanda mornings. Join the conversation with Dave and Debbie and Boyd Matheson middays. And Jeff Kaplan gives you the latest afternoons. All day, we have you covered on KSL News Radio.
Attention smart homeowners. You don't have to fall for flashy promises and companies that don't even prove their work. At Your Service Pros uses third-party verification software called MeasureQuick to ensure your new HVAC system is installed correctly. This ultimate game changer in the HVAC industry lets you, the homeowner, have proof of how your system was installed. At Your Service Pros utilizes our Bluetooth tools to upload all of your system's information into MeasureQuick. We rely on data-driven insights to properly commission, optimize, and fine-tune your HVAC system for peak performance, improving your family's comfort, lowering your utility bills, and extending the life of your HVAC system. With rebates and tax credits available totaling more than $7,500 on a dual fuel heating and cooling system, it is now more important than ever that your HVAC system be installed correctly. So call us today at 801-YOUR-PRO. That's 801-YOUR-PRO. Have the peace of mind of saving up to 50% on your new system and knowing it's installed correctly by calling 801-YOUR-PRO.
Angie's List is now Angie, and we've heard a lot of theories about why.
I thought it was an eco move. Fewer words, less paper.
No, it was so you could say it faster.
No, it's to be more iconic.
Must be a tech thing.
But those aren't quite right. It's because now you can compare upfront prices, book a service instantly, and even get your project handled from start to finish.
Sounds easy.
It is, and it makes us so much more than just a list. Get started at Angie.com. That's ANGI, or download the app today.
Yeah, I'm so stressed. Our business is growing. We've got people all over now.
Ooma.
What is that? Meditation?
I'm recommending the Ooma cloud phone system with auto attendant and more than 50 features.
Ooma?
Yep. Switching to Ooma is a cinch. Just $24.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Now you're feeling it. Find small business calm at ooma.com/radio. That's OOMA.com/radio.
They say good things come to those who wait. But this October, better things come to those who act now. What's up, everybody? I'm Mike Wilson with Any Hour Services, and October is the best month to replace your old furnace and air conditioner if you're trying to beat the winter rush. You see, we've structured our pre-season savings so that the sooner you buy, the more you save. Through the end of October, when you have Any Hour Services install your new furnace and air conditioner, you'll save $2,500 off any new system you choose. And that doesn't even factor in the rebates and incentives you might qualify for. All you have to do to get this deal is get a hold of Any Hour Services before the end of October and schedule a free estimate. After we show you what options are available, pick the system that best meets your needs, and we'll take $2,500 off. If you wait until November to call, you'll still save, but not as much. So if you want to save $2,500 off a new furnace and air conditioner, you need to call Any Hour Services before the end of October and schedule a free estimate. Google Any Hour Services or schedule online at anyhourservices.com. No one helps more homeowners than Any Hour Services.
Hey, this is Hans Olsen. There's a reason that more Utahns, including myself, are members of America First Credit Union. It's because we love being a part of a winning team. I opened my first business account with America First Credit Union going back 13 years ago. I've opened 4 accounts for each one of my children. I opened up my last business account with America First Credit Union because I know they're going to treat me and my family fairly. It's no wonder that Forbes magazine named America First to their 2023 Utah Best in State Credit Unions and their 2023 Utah Best in State Employers list. The only credit union in Utah to receive both awards. If you've got financial questions and needs, America First Credit Union has the answers. So come join me and thousands of others at Forbes Magazine's 2023 Utah Best in State Credit Union and Employer. Visit AmericaFirst.com or stop by your local branch. It's great to be on the winning team. Federally insured by NCUA.
Get to know Winter Fun more at the Utah Snowmobile Show at Mountain America Expo. Tickets at snowwest.com/Utah. The Utah Snowmobile Show, October 20th and 21st at Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy.
With the 3 things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bonas. First, the Palestinian Health Authority, which is controlled by Hamas, says as many as 500 people have been killed by an Israeli airstrike in a hospital in Gaza. Israeli defense forces say they can't say yet whether it was an Israeli strike. Second, Congressman Jim Jordan didn't get enough votes in the first round of voting on the House floor today to be elected Speaker of the House. And third, the pace of evictions has barely slowed in Utah since rental assistance programs expired weeks ago. 66 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson. As we continue our coverage of what is unfolding in our nation's capital, in the House of Representatives, I want to get, again, beyond the headlines a little bit and look at some of the things underneath that not a lot of folks are talking about that I think are really interesting and quite instructive in terms of where things really are. Clearly, Jim Jordan did not have sufficient votes. I don't think anybody on the planet expected him to win it on the first ballot. Again, knowing what Speaker McCarthy went through in order to get the gavel and then lose the gavel, this is a real divided Congress. The margins are very narrow. And as you look underneath the hood of that just a little bit and start to unpack some of the perspective, not just of the members, we often get lost and we view everything through the lens of Washington politics as opposed to what's going on with the people that these folks in Congress actually represent. And some really interesting polling came out just in the last couple of minutes from RMG. Talked about the fact that Jim Jordan is actually more popular amongst Republicans than Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, is amongst Democrats. So that's an interesting little bit of perspective when you get right down to the voters. So these are either registered Republicans or registered Democrats. When you ask them about Jim Jordan, 48% have a favorable or very favorable view of Jim Jordan. Only 15% have a negative view of Jim Jordan. On the Democratic side of these are just Democrats now, just Democrat voters, only 40% of Democrats have a positive view, a favorable view of Hakeem Jeffries, who is the minority leader. And again, we can note that he did get 212 votes to become the Speaker of the House, but he was still 5 short. So Hakeem Jeffries does not become the Speaker either. And again, he has the same kind of unfavorable. About 15% of Democrats have an unfavorable view, but only 40 have a positive of him. So a lot of this, people are saying, well, Jim Jordan can't do this or Jim Jordan can't be this. Whether or not you like Jim Jordan or not, it's pretty interesting to look at the fact that he is where a lot of the Republican voters are. And so I think it's going to be really fascinating as we get into rounds 2, 3, and 4 in particular, that it will be a question of how much are these members of Congress hearing from their constituents when it comes to their vote for Speaker of the House? And do they follow that? Do they heed that? You've got some Republicans that are in districts that President Joe Biden won in 2020. You have some that are very deep red that voted in favor of former President Donald Trump. Representing those constituents, always a tricky thing. As a member of the House, you have to manage all of that. And so it'll be interesting to see the influence of all of that. And I can tell you, those calls that go into members of Congress, into their offices, you may think you're talking to a staff member. You may think you're just talking to an intern. Those messages matter. They do have influence because they are tracked. They are listened to. They are noted and included in a host of different discussions. And so the thing that I'm going to be watching as they get ready for this round number 2, and I'm also hearing from a couple of sources in the chamber that one of the things they may be waiting on, there is one representative on the Republican side, Gus Bilirakis, I think is how you pronounce his name, from Florida, has actually been down in Florida for a family funeral. And he won't actually arrive back in Washington, D.C. until 6 p.m. Eastern time, 4 p.m. here in the state of Utah. So that's one additional vote. He's been a strong supporter of Jim Jordan. So they may be waiting and calibrating when he's going to arrive at Reagan International Airport and how quickly he can get to the Capitol and cast a vote. So that will also be playing out. The other thing to be watching in this next round of voting is how do the numbers move in round number 2? So you had a number of votes in round number 1. Some of those we just classified as a protest or a loyalty vote. Again, 7 of those went to Kevin McCarthy. 7 of those on the Republican side went to Steve Scalise. So do those numbers hold? In other words, it would show that those particular members of Congress are digging in a little bit in their opposition to Jim Jordan. Or do some of those begin to change and move towards Jim Jordan? He's moved a number of members that were very much against his nomination for the speakership, who have now become supporters. So that's an interesting little trend to track as well. So do those numbers go down in round number 2 in terms of those protests and loyalty opposition votes? How many does he pick up in round number 2? There's also a possibility, you just have to keep this in mind. There may be some of those who voted for Jim Jordan in round number 1 who may not vote for him in round number 2. That's not a given. And so the numbers can really flip-flop and move around. And we actually saw that back in January. There were a number of votes out of those 15 rounds that ultimately secured the speakership for Kevin McCarthy, where the numbers kind of went up and down, or they at least changed, who voted against, who voted for. And so we'll watch all of those things as it continues to play out there. I think probably the most important thing that Jim Jordan has going for him is that he does, as I mentioned before, seem to be where a lot of the Republican voters are. And let me just describe that. I've had a number of people doing some flash polling across the country once Jim Jordan got the nomination over the weekend to look at where are people and are they aligned with the kind of speaker that a Jim Jordan could be. And many said that they liked Jim Jordan, and most of them liked Jim Jordan because he was not considered to be an official Washington or one of the Washington elites. He wasn't someone who was just going to talk down his nose to voters, but he was one who was going to fight for voters. Now, we've heard this song before on both the Republican and the Democratic side of the aisle, by the way. And it's an interesting thing. There's this form of populism going on in our country, which is all fine and good. The problem is when populism becomes unhinged from principle, then we have a whole different set of problems. We'll save that discussion for a little later on. But when it comes to where we are today, it's very clear and apparent to me that the thing that the American people detest the most is what I call a smart wimp. Someone who's really smart, really sophisticated, but are never willing to really fight. Go along to get along, avoid any kind of contention, all about pacifying, peacekeeping, not really peacemaking, and having the hard conversations. And Washington consultants, campaigns, they turn a lot of great smart fighters into really smart wimps, and it drives the American people crazy. So what they really want is a smart fighter. And I shared this earlier in the day today here on KSL News Radio that the model that Jim Jordan is going after, ironically, is the same model that Nancy Pelosi used. Nancy Pelosi, again, whether you love her politics or hate them, was an incredibly smart fighter. And yes, she was divisive in many ways, but she became beloved by the base of her party and respected by everyone else because she was a fighter, yes, but she was a smart fighter. And Jim Jordan is trying to chart a very similar, very eerily similar path to see if he can't follow what Nancy Pelosi did to get the gavel and be the Speaker of the House. We'll step aside for some bottom-of-the-hour news. When we come back, more inside sources and how we have these conversations without just canceling everybody. Important conversation with Megan McArdle coming up next. Stick around.
It's 1:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. An Israeli airstrike has killed as many as 500 people at a hospital in Gaza, according to Associated Press. That 500 figure comes from the Palestinian Health Ministry, which is run by Hamas, and it says the number of casualties is expected to rise. Other media outlets put the casualty figure at 200 to 300. We haven't had that number confirmed by anyone just yet. The Ali Arab Baptist Hospital is in the central part of Gaza, and fighting since the war began last Saturday is focused on southern Israel and Gaza, but hundreds of thousands of people have been trying to leave the Gaza City area, expecting an Israeli ground attack to begin at any time. An Israeli military spokesperson says they don't have details yet about the deaths at the hospital, but they couldn't say for sure that it was an Israeli airstrike. Republican Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio didn't get enough votes this afternoon to be elected Speaker of the House. In the first round of voting, 20 Republicans voted against him. ABC's Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill says that leaves the legislative branch in a lurch.
Republicans have shown they cannot, at this stage, govern their own majority in the House of Representatives, and that has real ramifications for the unfolding crises in Israel as well as Ukraine, where there's big funding issues that will be at stake soon, government funding overall about a month from now, the big issues that are on the Republican agenda around border security, around potential impeachment of Joe Biden, all effectively shelved for the time being.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average down now 35 points on the day, where the NASDAQ is down 58 points right now. And our KSL weather, we're looking for clouds to move through the next day or so, and then it clears up again. KSL News Time 132.
Hi, Tim Hughes. We all know what it means to have a child in pain or with an injury looking to you for help. Please give right now to the KSL Give-a-thon at kslkids.com.
Is shopping for medical supplies online leaving you feeling intimidated and overwhelmed? Hi, I'm Jay Broadbent with Alpine Home Medical. I want to share a real customer story with you.
The moment I walked into Alpine, I felt cared for. They pulled me into a private room, and the Alpine professional happily set up my CPAP machine, explaining everything I needed to know. The service didn't stop there. After I went home, Alpine called me a week later just to check on me. These guys really are the experts. Before Alpine, I was so stressed trying to navigate what I needed online by myself, but all the stress went away when I went to their store. They really do deserve 5 stars.
We know when you walk through our doors, you deserve to be cared for. Stop by any of our 11 locations and discover the Alpine Home Medical difference. When you need assistance, we're here for you.
Alpine Home Medical, we bring wellness home.
AlpineHomeMedical.com.
Have you Googled yourself lately? Are there negative posts from an ex-employee or from a former client? Maybe an outdated news article or sensitive personal information about your family? Search engines don't always get it right. For right or wrong, it's your reputation on the line. That's where Reputation Defender by Norton comes in. One of the most trusted names in online reputation repair, Reputation Defender has been fixing people's search results for over 15 years. Their cutting-edge approaches help you to wipe away unwanted information in your search results. They also promote the good stuff so that it rises to the top, helping you put your best foot forward. Your good name is too valuable to leave to the whims of a Google algorithm. Take control with Reputation Defender. You can start by getting your free reputation report card at reputationdefender.com or call 800-401-6681 to speak to an expert. That's 800-401-6681.
As the weather turns colder, this is when you need to get those new windows. So call Advanced Window Products. They'll replace your single-pane, rickety old windows with stylish, state-of-the-art double-pane windows with precision frames. You pick the style and color. They're custom-made right here in Salt Lake City. This company is so Utah. It's run by 2 guys who grew up here, Jake Weber and Utes defensive star Nate Orchard, the mayor of Sacktown with 7 NFL seasons under his belt. Great guys. Great company building high-quality windows for 37 years. Unlike other companies, they build the windows, they install the windows, and they guarantee them for life. No middleman. There's Jake, Nate, and their team, and there's you. Saving on the highest quality windows. Right now, before winter, get $2,000 off 10 windows or more, and they offer 60 months, 0% financing. So call Advanced Window Products now. You could have stylish new windows in 8 weeks. 801-850-9100. 801-850-9100 or visit AdvancedWindowsUSA.com.
Fall in love with Five All's Restaurant this autumn. A Salt Lake City original. Cozy atmosphere, perfect for all your special occasions. Now open Wednesdays too. Come dine at Five All's.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Josh Kitchen.
We have good speeds on I-15 from Ogden all the way down to Santaquin, but there are delays on Victory Highway, that's 10 miles southeast of Heber City, and in both directions. With over 30-plus specialties and multiple locations across Utah, Revere has you covered for all your health needs. Revere Health, your partner in health, your partner for life. Online at reverehealth.com. I'm Josh Kitchen in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, a high of 74 with a few clouds today, then more clouds moving through tomorrow with a high of 69. Sunny and warmer Thursday and Friday. Right now, sunny and 68. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Over the last week, we've seen surprising and even disheartening demonstrations where people are blaming Israel for the war, refusing to condemn Hamas and the atrocities that were committed there. We see this particularly on university campuses. There's been a host of headlines around that. Some are calling for protesters to be blacklisted. Some countries in Europe have gone so far as to ban future demonstrations. But the question beyond the headline is that the right move? What does a commitment to free speech look like during times like these? There are some very interesting conversations that we have to get to beyond the headline. We've heard a lot about what's been going on college campuses and what the response to that should be, or should it be allowed. And as always, when we try to get past the headline and think again about things, we turn to Megan McArdle, a journalist, columnist, a blogger based in Washington, D.C., writes for the Washington Post, and is one of the great thinkers and writers in our country. And Megan, welcome back to the show. And your piece has just been resonating with me all weekend, that canceling is actually wrong, no matter how bad the speech is.
Yeah, this has been a real hard argument to make this week, and I want to be clear. To start off with, I stand with Israel's right to exist and the people in it to be safe. So, and I really disagreed radically with the people who went out and defended these terrible atrocities that were committed, the killing of young children, burning families. These are horrible things, and I think that they are inexcusable. That said, I want to stand for the right of people to try to make excuses for them. These are, what people in a country like the Palestinians are entitled to do in disputes over land and so forth. That's a legitimate object of discussion. I think I know the answer, but the whole point of having a free speech culture is to put everything on the table, because, I think that the thing that we often forget is that the essence of right belief is not just believing the right thing. It is not ignoring questions. It is answering the questions in the affirmative. Right?
Yeah.
And this is, we can't just say, oh, well, it's wrong what Hamas did because you can't even discuss it. That's how wrong it is. It's more that, actually, this is an easy defense. You can't kill babies. I don't need to prevent you from saying that. I can make that argument pretty clearly. And that, I think, has gotten lost in this whole thing. I think, it's just been a really, it's obviously a very emotional time for everyone. My heart goes out to anyone who has family or friends in the region, on the Palestinian or the Israeli side. These are terrible times right now, but we have to be able to have discussions and not just shout down anyone who disagrees with us.
Yeah, that's right. And it is so easy because such horrific scenes and such heavy news to absorb and take all of that in. But we always have to remember that if we just want everyone to believe or think one way, or that only one view can be expressed, that's sort of what China and Russia and some of these other places actually look like. So, of course, we don't want that. One of the things you pointed out in your piece in the Post is that it's ironic that on our college campuses, which have been so politically correct in so many ways, have really embraced cancel culture in a lot of ways, and now suddenly the shoe's on the other foot. But we still have to defend the right of even the indefensible to make their case.
Absolutely. And, actually, I think one of the reasons that this happens is precisely that the left had gotten so successful at shouting people down that when we came to this moment where this terrible thing has happened, and look, I think that the Palestinian people have real legitimate grievances against the state of Israel, but that people on the left had gotten so used to shouting down the people who disagreed with them that they'd kind of forgotten that they weren't, that other people might disagree with them and that might have consequences for them. I mean, as I've been arguing against cancel culture for years now, what I've gotten back is it's not cancel culture, it's accountability culture. You have a right to speak, but you don't have a right to be free from consequences. Well, I think one of the consequences of that attitude is actually what we're seeing now, which is that people said things that sounded horrific, and I don't think it occurred to any of them that there could be real consequences for them and there could be pushback because they had insulated themselves from other ideas. I don't want to see us make that same mistake in dealing with what I think are really wrong, really egregious ideas that need to be argued against forcefully. I don't want to see us make the mistake of saying, la, 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 I can't hear you, but rather to mount the affirmative defense of the right to people to be secure in their beds.
Yeah, so important. And some of those consequences have played out even to places like the University of Pennsylvania, where our own John Huntsman Jr. came out and said, well, you can have that and you can believe that and you can act that way, but you can't do that with my money or with our foundation's money anymore. And so you had more people say, okay, fine, if you want to do cancel culture, again, we can have a very broad discussion about what that means, or we can vote with our pocketbooks. We can vote at the voting booth. But most important, bringing it full circle to your point, Megan, and that is we still have to have it on the table. We have to allow things to compete in the marketplace of ideas. That is the cornerstone of what this country is all about.
Exactly. And, I think it's unfortunate. I get where those donors are. I'm not criticizing and saying, oh, you can't do that. But I do think it's actually really unfortunate that that's where we are, that donors felt like, oh, well, I'm going to withhold my money. Because, I think that's what academic freedom was actually created to prevent, was donors and trustees saying to professors, well, you can't pursue that line of inquiry. We don't want to hear it. And I think that, on the one hand, I am arguing, again, we should give people the grace. We should not cancel them. I do understand that people feel like, well, you've left me nothing else. You won't listen to anything I say. You won't even let me speak. Well, I'm going to talk with my money. Yeah. And I wish that we had instead been promoting a healthy culture of debate where students could say these things, and frankly, where administrations were not publishing official statements on controversial topics that don't directly affect the university, because that's not really their job. Their job is to make a neutral place for other people to have the big, important arguments.
Yeah, and to have those big, important arguments. Again, America's always at its best when we are a country of big ideas, open, roiling debate on important issues, and then we let those ideas and principles compete, and that's how everything moves forward. Megan, as you look at it moving forward, obviously we're just in the second week of a lot of these atrocities. I think it's still kind of sinking in for a lot of folks in terms of what really happened. What do you hope is the next? Is there a step? Is there a half step that we can begin today that each of us can do in our own personal lives and communities to change the dynamic of that cancel culture and have a different kind of conversation?
I think the thing is to understand, look, if you have been to the West Bank as I have, and you have seen people who are clearly suffering, whose parents were on this land, who don't understand how they got selected to be removed, because after the Holocaust, how they ended up collectively paying for Germany's sins. Look, I really do see both sides here. I see why the Palestinians are angry. I also see, having grown up in a mostly Jewish neighborhood, why Jewish people feel like they have to have a country where they are safe, where they have the right of return, so that they can say never again. Both of those things are true, and that's the tragedy of the Middle East. And I think the thing we have to remember is that, there have been both sides have done bad things to each other. I think we can probably all agree with them on that. And that whoever you think has most of the right in this situation, that there are people out there who are hurting, that these are hard, difficult conversations. And the way you have hard and difficult conversations is with dignity, is by treating everyone in the region, Muslim or Jewish or Christian, Palestinian or Israeli. Remember, these are human beings who suffer and who deserve dignity and the right to make a decent life for themselves and their families. And always keep those people in mind when you're discussing this, but also keep in mind that your opponent, however horrible what they're saying is, most people are not evil psychopaths. Sometimes, I'm Irish American, and I think most Irish Americans of a certain age, we knew people who gave money to terrorism or who supported it emotionally, and who after 9/11, by the way, really had a sea change. When they saw what it meant to the victims, they really changed. And so don't think, oh my gosh, this person must be so horrible. They're the worst person because they said this thing. Sometimes even decent people can say things they don't quite mean because they're not really thinking the whole thing through. And the important thing is, don't be one of those people.
Don't
Try to be the person who's always giving your opponents the maximum of dignity and respect, who's always trying to think from their point of view, who is always trying to, holding firm for important principles like there are some things that you cannot do, and attacking civilians is among them. Just remember, try to just always keep that focus of we're all human beings struggling through a lot of hard stuff together.
That's my conversation with Megan McArdle from the Washington Post. And this is one of the hardest things, I think, for many of us to navigate in this kind of season and scenario. We look at the atrocities carried out by terrorists. We look at the things that are happening to innocent civilians. And it gets very difficult very fast. But we have to remember that free speech that we love to tout is there for everybody. And so let's embrace that. Let's recognize that. Let's hold strong to that core truth and belief, as Megan pointed out. And let's make sure that we always have dignity across our differences, that we have respect across our differences, and that we can have a different kind of conversation in this country. Because if we expect to continue to be an influence for good, for freedom, and for human rights across the country, that actually has to begin right here at home. President Biden is heading off to Israel to have some of those important conversations. We'll do a preview of what that might look like, what the key messages are, what the challenges are going to be when we come back on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio.
Let's head out. The theater's about to close.
Wait, what does that sign say?
Warning, watch your step?
No, next to it.
If you are 60 or older, you may be at increased risk of serious consequences from RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, compared to adults younger than 60. I didn't know that.
Not all dangers come with warning labels. Talk to your pharmacist or doctor about getting vaccinated against RSV today. RSV vaccines, including Pfizer's, are available. Learn more at bewareofrsv.com. Brought to you by Pfizer.
At Common Spirit Holy Cross Hospitals, we're honored to carry the legacy of our namesake and to extend the legacy of care in our communities. We're part of 20 hospitals and 240 clinics across Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
With our roots in northern Utah, Common Spirit Holy Cross Hospitals have a legacy of caring to help every person be whole and healthy. We're part of 20 hospitals and 240 clinics across Colorado, Kansas, and Utah. Learn more at holycrossutah.org.
Zerorez Carpet and Air Duct Cleaning is offering their Friends and Family special today only. Schedule your carpet cleaning during the sale and you'll pay just $25 per room. That's right, $25 for the best no residue cleaning. Zerorez pioneered this method, and their no soaps, no residue cleaning means your carpets stay cleaner longer. Listen, your vacuum will never get them truly clean. And quit messing around with that handheld thing. It's not doing you justice. Nothing beats a professional cleaning, and no one outcleans Zerorez. Give yourself the best cleaning at the best price. The Friends and Family sale is on now and ends today. Just $25 per room. You don't have to clean today, but you do have to get on the schedule. Minimums and area restrictions apply. Offer valid in Salt Lake, Utah, Davis, and Weber counties only. Schedule today, online at Zerorez.com.
Hi, this is Doug Wright, and everybody's heard of Firestone, Bridgestone, and Goodyear tires, but have you heard about the sale at Burt Brothers right now with up to $200 off a set of 4 tires? Even the winter-loving Bridgestone Blizzak tires up to $130 off right now. until December 16th. So don't miss these huge savings. And if you're in the market for tires, perfect time to buy. And remember, the Burt Bundle is everything. This makes all the difference. All kinds of things for free, like rotations, balancing, rebalancing, alignment checks, flat repairs, and it goes on and on. The people at Burt Brothers, they can take care of the entire vehicle. They do more than just tires. We're talking brakes, batteries, oil changes, heat and AC, shocks, struts, basically anything that your automobile needs. There's a great Burt Brothers location near you. You're going to love the difference, the great care you get at Burt Brothers.
Football and camping has Bish's RV fired up for fall, and we're ready to tailgate our tails off during the Bish's RV Ultimate Tailgating Sale. October 19th through the 21st, we're hosting the biggest tailgating sale ever, just in time for homecoming. We're bringing you all the fall clearance RV deals, like blowout pricing on all remaining new 2023s, payments starting as low as $140 per month on approved credits, and no payments until 2024 OAC. Go to bishes.com/homecoming to start shopping today. We've also got America's favorite floor plan, the Go Play 26 BHS travel trailer, on sale for only $24,995. But here's where things get really big. Come kick it with Chase Roberts and his teammates. October 19th from 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. for autographs, giveaways, and free food and family fun. Get fired up for homecoming at the Ultimate Tailgating Sale. October 19th through the 21st at Bish's RV in American Fork. Previously Stewart's RV, where memories begin. SDK number R73124. MSRP $38,356. Subject to prior sale. Payments based on 10% down, 9.24% APR for 180 months. Not all buyers will qualify. See dealer for details.
Save $2,500 on a new furnace and air conditioner from Any Hour Services. For more information, call Any Hour Services or schedule a free estimate online at anyhourservices.com.
Go to KSLkids.com and donate to the KSL Give-a-thon. We need your help raising money for sick Utah kids receiving treatment at Primary Children's Hospital.
Be a smile maker. An automatic gift each month helps save the lives of children all year long. Sponsored by J&J Garden Center in Layton.
A big thanks to other generous sponsors, including Big Canyon Homes and Sugar House Industries, for their amazing support of the kids at Primary Children's.
With the KSL Give-a-thon, we can't do it without you. Please give.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, an Israeli airstrike has reportedly killed hundreds of people at a hospital in Gaza. Reported casualties range from 200 to 500. Second, Congressman Jim Jordan came up short today in the first round of voting for Speaker of the House. 20 Republicans voted against him. Third, Utah has seen a rash of auto pedestrian accidents in the month of October. Right now, 68 degrees and sunny in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Rage from Reason on Inside Sources.
Tomorrow, the president will make a personal visit to Israel. He will be following his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who has literally crisscrossed the region, along with Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. So there's been a real diplomatic push by the United States, not just in Israel, but to many of those key allies there in the Middle East. And so we wanted to look just quickly to kind of keep the framing in front of us. It's so easy to get caught in the horrific images and a lot of the tales of trauma and all of the challenges that are going on, to look at where are we, what are the next steps, where's the focus, because it's so easy to get lost in the process of all of that. And so I actually want to start with something that Strategic Communications Director for the White House, John Kirby, who has probably been as many places as the Secretary of Defense and Secretary of State, as he tries to really frame and shape the message for the White House in terms of what President Biden's agenda is, how he's going to deal with the challenges in the region. And earlier today, he said that there are some pretty basic objectives that the president wants to make sure he gets to when he gets to Israel.
First is making sure he gets an update from our Israeli counterparts about their plans, their intentions, how things are going on the ground, and make sure that he conveys a strong message of continued support for their Israeli defense forces and their ability to continue to prosecute these operations against Hamas. And number two, it's really on the humanitarian front, and he'll be hitting that not only hard while he's in Israel, but when he goes to Amman, Jordan, and speaks to President Sisi of Egypt, President Abbas of the Palestinian Authority, and of course King Abdullah, all focused on making sure that humanitarian humanitarian assistance can flow in and that people who want to leave can get out. And obviously, he's going to be very focused on the hostage situation, particularly those few American hostages that we know are being held by Hamas.
So I think it's really important when you look at what the president needs to get done during his time in Israel. First is, of course, to reinforce that solidarity with Israel. Then the hostage situation. Clearly, there are Americans amongst those hostages. That has to be one of the highest priorities. Then the humanitarian component to all of this. And how do you deal with the hundreds of thousands that are being displaced? And what happens there? How do you deal with those? Again, there are some that have dual citizenship as Americans, trying to get across borders into Egypt and to other places that are being stopped. How do you make sure all of that can take place? And then I think the real question when it comes to what the IDF and what Israel is doing as they try to root out Hamas in Gaza is what's the next step part of the equation? If they do that, then what happens inside of Gaza? So going back to John Kirby, he was actually with George Stephanopoulos earlier today as well, and asked that very question. What's the plan for Gaza if Hamas is ultimately eliminated? And Kirby admitted he hasn't seen or heard much in terms of what happens next.
That, I think, is a question that hasn't been answered yet. And it's a fair question. And it's one that we're obviously talking to our Israeli counterparts about. What happens the day after? What does Gaza look like? I think they're still working their way through some of that. We're going to have those kinds of conversations with them immediately right now in the near term, is making sure that they can continue to precisely target and go after Hamas.
So I think one of the important things to look at in all of that, there does have to be that therefore what question at the end. If Israel does go through, if they do eradicate and remove Hamas from Gaza, what happens the next day? And this is one of those lessons. This is a leadership lesson that it's easy to get very target driven. And you can think of all the different places in your life where you become very target driven. You kind of get your checklist done for the day, or within a business, maybe that target is dropping a press release or delivering a new product or a report to your boss, and we become very target driven. But those that are really effective, especially when it comes to governing countries and making sure we have peace in the world, there's this punch through strategy. It's not just enough to get to the deliverable. You have to know what's next. And how do you maintain it? How do you sustain it? And how do you move it forward? And far too often we get targeted on, we're just going to do this. We're going to eliminate X, or we're going to take care of problem Y. But then we never get to now what? And I think that's one of the big questions for Israel. And it's one of the things that I hope President Biden will really lean in his conversations with Prime Minister Netanyahu and his team in terms of where do we go from here? If you are successful in removing Hamas from Gaza, then what? What's the next step? And asking those kinds of questions will also help frame how the U.S. can be most helpful. You don't know how to help if you don't know what the next step is. And understanding that in a little different way, I think, is an important part of the question and an important part of the equation that we have to get to, which is why we always have to ask the next level question. It isn't enough to just say, well, we want to de-escalate. We want a truce. We want a ceasefire. That's a good start, but it's not the second level question. We have to get to what's next in order to really sustain it into something that will have momentum to drive everything forward. All right, that wraps up hour number one of Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. We're going to step aside for some top of the hour news. When we come back in hour number two, we're going to talk a little more about the president's trip. And we're going to talk specifically about the role of Egypt and Jordan, what they will play coming up next.
KSL FM Midvale.
KSL Salt Lake City.
Listen at home on any smart speaker.
And in your car at 102.7 FM.
This is KSL News Radio.
Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
It's 2 o'clock at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. The Gaza Health Ministry says Israeli forces bombed the Baptist Hospital in Gaza, killing at least 500 civilians. The hospital was sheltering thousands of civilians who've been forced to flee from the northern part of the Gaza Strip. President Mahmoud Abbas of the Palestinian Authority has declared 3 days of mourning. ABC News has been talking to 21-year-old college student Taza Herzala.
We as civilians, where are we supposed to go? We went to schools, they bombed schools. We went to the south, they bombed the south. We went to hospitals, they bombed the hospitals.
The spokesperson for the Israeli military says they are checking whether Israel is actually behind that explosion. ABC reports the Palestinian Authority president, Mahmoud Abbas, has canceled his scheduled meeting with President Biden tomorrow. The two had a phone call on Saturday in which the White House says President Biden said he fully supports efforts to bring humanitarian aid into Gaza. The Palestinian Authority controls parts of the occupied West Bank, but it's a rival faction to Hamas. In the House of Representatives, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan failed to win the speakership on the first ballot. He's going to keep trying, as ABC News national correspondent Stephen Portnoy reports.
Despite having lost on the first ballot with 20 GOP defectors, Jim Jordan tells ABC News the voting will continue, and he's still feeling confident.
We've already talked to some members who are going to vote with us on the second ballot.
But Jordan can only afford to lose a handful of Republicans. Colorado's Ken Buck remains a no for now, citing Jordan's refusal to acknowledge that President Biden won in 2020.
It's very difficult for Americans to get that group of people in the middle to trust us when we can't admit that we lost an election.
Stephen Portnoy, ABC News, Washington.
Your money at this moment, the Dow Jones average near the end of trading is back up above even now, 13 points. While the NASDAQ is still down on the day, 34 points. And our weather looks like it'll get a little bit cloudy tomorrow, but then clear out for the rest of the week. That's next. KSL News Time, 2:02.
Hi, this is Amanda Dixon. No matter what traffic you're facing, children at Primary Children's Hospital face so much more. The KSL Give-a-thon has begun. Please give now at kslkids.com.
Imagine how inconvenient your life would be without power. No lights, no refrigeration, no heating or cooling, and no electronics. But with a Generac home standby generator, you'll have the power when you need it most. Generac generators automatically provide backup after sensing a power outage, so your life goes on uninterrupted. Schedule a free quote today with Genco Generators, your premier Generac service dealer in Utah. Call 801-295-0872 or online at gencogenerators.net.
Made to shine. Real stories from Shane Company customers.
My aunt lives in Long Island. Growing up, we were really close. She's always been really accepting and very supportive. She's a little sassy and even rides a motorcycle. This year, I really wanted to do something special for her and let her know how much she means to me. So for her birthday, I got her a bracelet and I had it engraved with our initials to represent our bond. She loves it.
Remind someone how special they are with a personalized gift. Shane Company, fine jewelry since 1929.
Go to kslkids.com and donate to the KSL Give-a-thon. We need your help raising money for sick Utah kids receiving treatment at Primary Children's Hospital.
Be a smile maker. An automatic gift each month helps save the lives of children all year long. Sponsored by J&J Garden Center in Layton.
A big thanks to other generous sponsors, including Big Canyon Homes and Sugar House Industries, for their amazing support of the kids at Primary Children's.
With the KSL Give-a-thon, we can't do it without you. Please give.
I'm Erin Mendenhall. No amount of crime is okay, but crime in Salt Lake City is at its lowest in years. We're putting more officers on the street, reducing response times, improving training, and we've partnered with the feds to take violent repeat offenders off our streets. I've worked hard to make our city safer. That's why our police and firefighters have endorsed me for a second term. I'm determined to keep our city moving forward, and I won't let anyone take us back. Paid for by Erin Mendenhall for Salt Lake City.
Gillette Heating and Air Conditioning is offering furnace maintenance for 30% off. Call 385-GET-HEAT today to take advantage of this limited time offer. Carrier, turn to the experts.
Traffic and weather together brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Josh Kitchen.
We have two new crashes in Salt Lake County. That first one's northbound I-15 at the 4500 South off-ramp. That's on the right shoulder. And our second one is northbound I-15 again. That's at the 600 North on-ramp, and again, it's on the right shoulder. Imagine talented vocalists performing your favorite songs with full power of the Utah Symphony. Get your tickets for the Pop Concert Series at utahsymphony.org. I'm Josh Kitchen in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, we're looking for a high of 74 today with a few clouds. Then more tomorrow and a high of 69. Sunny and warmer Thursday and Friday. And right now, 70 degrees with sunshine. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com, Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
The headlines today, of course, include President Biden, that he will visit Israel tomorrow, sending a message of solidarity after the Hamas attacks that were so brutal and devastating. But he's also going to engage in diplomacy in the region with many of our allies. And while the headlines tend to be around Israel, there are two Arab countries underneath the headlines that could play a key role and maybe even hold the keys to what happens in the Israel-Hamas turmoil. Let's begin.
Think you know the news of the day? Think again with Boyd Matheson on KSL News Radio.
Well, we want to go past just the big headlines and look at some of those subtleties and nuances in terms of the president's trip to the region and what that might mean. And in particular, really pleased to have joining us back on the program, Laura Kelly, foreign policy reporter for our friends over at The Hill. And Laura, welcome back to the show, and a great piece today, getting to that nuance of two important Arab countries that really could, as you said, hold the key for President Biden in calming the turmoil.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
And so give us some perspective as we look at that. We've heard a little bit about Egypt in terms of the border and the Palestinians in terms of the humanitarian side of things. But give us the broader perspective in terms of the role of both Egypt and Jordan and what President Biden might be trying to position as he heads to the Middle East.
Yes, well, I want to first say that the situation, I think everyone can appreciate that it's very delicate, it's fast moving, it's changing. And in fact, I published this piece about 12:30 in the afternoon, and we're seeing now reports that there was a rocket attack on a hospital in the Gaza Strip. And that's kind of raising a lot of questions of how that will impact President Biden's trip to the region and the diplomacy to be carried out with Egypt and Jordan. Egypt and Jordan both have peace treaties with Israel, but as I write in the piece, they're called cold peace treaties, where the governments work together. They have a productive security relationship, but there's no real warm ties between the people or the cultures. And Jordan, the majority of the population of the country is Palestinian. So they are very affected by what's happening. And Jordan and Egypt will have to balance standing up for Palestinians in terms of the humanitarian aid they need to receive in the Gaza Strip, and also to acknowledge and work towards saving Palestinian lives that are now coming under threat from Israeli airstrikes that the Israeli government says are focused on rooting out Hamas, targeting their military infrastructure, and targeting their leaders. And I just want to say it's still really unclear this rocket attack or explosion at this hospital in Gaza. Immediately, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, his office came out blaming Israel for the attack. Jordan came out blaming Israel for the attack. Turkey is blaming Israel for the attack. But the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli government are saying, based on their intelligence, they think it was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad, a military group in the Gaza Strip, that actually misfired a rocket towards Israel that hit the hospital. So there's a lot of moving parts and just a very devastating situation.
Yeah, and Laura, I so appreciate that you're getting us all to slow down a little bit. It's so easy to jump to the instant certainty in all of this, and I'm so grateful that you remind us all that this is fast-moving, very fluid, constantly changing. There is the fog of war in terms of what is or isn't happening, what's coming from Israel, what's going out from Gaza, what's happening with other groups within the area. And a lot of times we just don't know, and we have to be willing to say, we don't know yet. Here's what we do know, and then be able to either correct it or move forward on it is such an important thing. And I appreciate you emphasizing that. I think that's critical to all of this discussion. And so take us through a little bit. You mentioned Jordan's role, and clearly with the Palestinian connection there, clearly what has happened at the hospital has to impact the mood and the support or would-be support in terms of anything coming out of Jordan. Give us a sense of how this might impact that.
Before the hospital attack happened, there was a really large focus on finding a solution for allowing the delivery of humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip. That's kind of been held up on the Egyptian side of the border with Gaza. The Gaza Strip is a very narrow piece of land that's bordered on two sides by Israel, one side of the Mediterranean Sea, and one side by Egypt. Israel has it's a closed military zone on its side of the border with Gaza. I think they still are fighting any Hamas infiltrators that might be coming in as they're trying to secure the border. And then Egypt has this crossing that it said it's not been able to open since because Israeli airstrikes are preventing that from happening. So the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been in the region trying to coordinate with all the different players on getting that humanitarian corridor open. And it was speculation from one of the people I interviewed of whether Israel kind of helping to facilitate that humanitarian corridor would help lay the groundwork for President Biden to arrive in the region. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to play out at the moment.
Yeah, so fascinating. And give us a quick sense in terms of Egypt. Obviously, they have been very hesitant to open that passageway into Egypt for those coming out of Gaza. Are you getting any sense from any of your sources in terms of what those conversations are looking like, or what Egypt is looking for in things beyond just opening a corridor for things to go in, but also for some of those innocent civilians to come out?
Yes, we saw Secretary Blinken come out after meetings around the region, really an extraordinary tour of diplomacy where he went from Israel to Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt, and I might be missing a country in there as well. And all of those leaders of those countries, including Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas, said really in one voice to Secretary Blinken, do not allow the Israelis to force Palestinians from their homes in Gaza. And one was that Egypt does not want to take on a refugee crisis and have about 1 million Palestinians flood into the Sinai Peninsula. Jordan also doesn't want to be responsible for taking in more Palestinian refugees. It still hosts refugee camps from the 1967 war and families descendant from Israel's 1948 War of Independence. And Secretary Blinken said that moving Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip is a non-starter, and that's a pretty big statement from the Secretary of State for the U.S.
Yeah, and he's got all of his passport stamps. I think he's over his quota for a week long of hopping from country to country, 7+ and counting, I think. And I think that's an important message, as you pointed out, Laura, that it does look like that doesn't seem to be the way to go in terms of moving those civilians into Egypt. Anything else that you're watching underneath the surface, some things that might have impact or influence on all of this, and ultimately what the president will be doing over the next 48 hours?
The big question is, if Israel has said that Hamas can no longer exist, if President Biden says that Hamas can no longer exist, what happens after Israel eliminates Hamas in whatever form that may take? who will administer the Gaza Strip? Who will be responsible for the Palestinians who live there? And what does that look like in terms of what the U.S. says is still the goal of a two-state solution for Israel to be secure in its borders as a Jewish state and for Palestinians to have their own independent state? This is a peace process that has been stalled and has, I want to use the word, it's just caused so much heartbreak. That's not even a strong enough word for the people in this region. And they haven't moved forward. They've really only moved backwards. And will this be the moment that there needs to be an extreme paradigm shift in the region to bring back security and stability, or are they going to kick the ball down the road as they had for decades? It's really hard choices now.
Yeah, no question about it. Laura Kelly, foreign policy reporter for The Hill, thoughtful, great perspective on all of this. Thanks so much for weighing in today. And I know it's a very busy day for you with a lot of breaking news going on. We'll continue to tap into your perspective as we move all of this forward. Laura, thanks again so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's some really thoughtful, meaningful reflection from Laura Kelly from The Hill. There are so many things moving so fast. Instant certainty is the enemy of truth, and it undermines trust, and especially in the midst of this kind of conflict. And so when the headlines flash, make sure you zoom out, take a step back, make sure you're checking your sources, and then let things come along. Because so often we get caught in the fiery reaction to things, the emotional reaction to things, rather than to having the thoughtful, principled discussion that can move the conversation forward.
Think again on Inside Sources with Boyd Matheson. BYU tries to rebound from a beatdown.
This is Big 12 football, brother.
This Saturday, the Cougars host the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Both teams will be desperate for a win and focused on proving their doubters wrong. Special extended pregame coverage starts Saturday at high noon on Utah's legacy home of the Cougars. KSL News Radio.
Here's the deal. When it comes to your health and wellness, you can make progress or you can make excuses, but you cannot do both. And it's time to get rid of the excuses because they don't lead you anywhere. It's time for progress, and the best way to go about it is with SOTA Weight Loss. SOTA stands for state-of-the-art weight loss because it is, and it works because it's not about excuses. It's about proven science. It's about proven principles. It's about a support system and structure that's going to help you through the challenging times and to get you to the place that you actually want to be. I lost 37 pounds in 90 days. I am almost 2 years in and still right at that same ideal weight. I feel better. I have more energy. I have more clarity. I sleep better, and I'm able to do the things that I really want. And you can do the same because it is a trusted process. No more excuses. Time to make progress. As it always comes to your SOTA weight loss journey, no time to lose, only time to win. Start winning today. Check it out at sotaweightloss.com, SOTAweightloss.com.
At Intermountain Primary Children's Hospital, we made a bold promise to build the nation's model health system for children. Join us in realizing our vision for the future of pediatric care. So together, we can expand primary children's impact and ensure every child has access to the right care at the right place at the right time. For a century, Primary Children's has kept the child first and always. Help us continue to do so for the next 100 years. To get involved, visit primarypromise.org.
Advertising used to be simple. Your options were radio, TV, newspaper, and let's not forget the yellow pages. Now it seems like a tidal wave of options. Podcast, cable TV, streaming, OTT, CTV, audio networks,
smart speakers. On top of that, you need digital marketing for your website along with SEM, SEO, display, video, YouTube, email, and all the social media platforms.
Look, you're the expert in your business. Wouldn't it be nice to have an expert to market you? We are Bonneville Salt Lake, the local marketing and media company you know and trust. We reach customers across all digital and social platforms and have the reach of traditional advertising available as well. We find your customer anytime, any place, anywhere on any device here in Utah or anywhere in the world. We work to optimize your results with our in-house local team of experts, providing you with qualified leads, not just impressions. Contact us at aimyourdigital.com for for a free consultation, including a complete digital audit with no obligation or cost to you. We are Bonneville Salt Lake. Your success starts at aimyourdigital.com.
Any Hour Services can help you make sure your furnace keeps you warm this winter. Whether you need a tune-up or repair or a second opinion about replacing it, call Any Hour Services or visit anyhourservices.com.
Join KSL's Matt Biamonte this Friday for Macy's BYU Tailgate Party in Provo from 4 to 7 p.m. Stop by Macy's in Provo, 1400 North State for your chance to win tickets to watch BYU versus Texas Tech Red Raiders, plus Macy's gift cards and more.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, at least 500 Palestinians have reportedly been killed by an Israeli airstrike on a hospital in Gaza. The Israeli military says it's checking whether it was behind that attack. Second, the president of the Palestinian Authority has canceled a meeting with President Biden tomorrow. The two had planned to discuss getting humanitarian aid into Gaza. And third, the House of Representatives still has no speaker after Representative Jim Jordan lost his first vote. He plans to try again, but a second vote hasn't been scheduled yet. 70 degrees and sunny now in Salt Lake City, and back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Boyd Matheson divides rage from reason on Inside Sources.
Well, as we continue to track all the other news that's happening internationally, what's happening in the House of Representatives, it's been one of those weeks where the presidential politics has sort of slid under the radar just a little bit. Not too far, just enough. Right now, the 2024 presidential candidates have been releasing their campaign fundraising numbers for the third quarter. So always telling you got to have resources to run a campaign, resources of time, money, emotion. The last time we'll get a peek at these finances before we start marching our way towards those critical caucuses in Iowa coming up in January. So when it comes to presidential campaigns, we know that money matters for sure. Who's ahead? Who's struggling enough to raise? Who can actually get their message out moving into 2024? And really thrilled to have on the show Stephen Shepard, Politico's senior campaign and elections editor and chief polling analyst. Stephen, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Hey, so let's take a look at this. You kind of broke it down in terms of who's up, who's down, and who's maybe going deep six at this point in the program. What are the numbers in terms of dollars and cents tell us?
Well, Boyd, you know this, that, campaigns don't end, presidential campaigns especially do not end because candidates are failing to gain traction. They end because candidates are running out of money. It may not be surprising if you look at the polls that when it comes to the money race, the Republican field is similarly dominated by Donald Trump. He raised twice as much as anybody else, has well more in cash on hand for the primary than any of his rivals, including Ron DeSantis and Tim Scott, who had a lot of money that he was able to carry over from his Senate campaign last year, and Nikki Haley, who has risen in the polls and is starting to get a little bit more both in terms of her fundraising and some outside support from the super PAC, but still well behind Trump. And that matches, again, kind of where the trajectory of this race has been going. We've been waiting for a long time to see who would build that campaign that could go toe-to-toe with Trump when it comes down to as we get closer to Iowa and New Hampshire. And we thought earlier this year that it would be Ron DeSantis. Pretty clear looking at these campaign finance reports that right now it's not. And it's really not anyone, which sort of matches the polling right now that shows Trump so far ahead.
Yeah, and so as you break that down, I want to look at those three candidates in particular. They all kind of have about the same amount of cash on hand. Tim Scott from South Carolina, DeSantis, as you mentioned, and then former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, all kind of in that 11 to 13 million in the bank. Break that down for us just a little bit. DeSantis had a lot going in, may have been one of those cash flow covers a multitude of sins and problems in a campaign. We know he's been cutting back, but has he changed the trajectory at all? And then what are Scott and Haley doing in terms of using some of that money to actually get some traction with their message?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right that they're all sort of together. Now, I would add that the figures that we learned about this week from these campaign finance reports only apply to the campaigns. They do not apply to their super PACs. And we know that Ron DeSantis has had the sort of best funded super PAC because due to the vagaries of campaign finance law, he was able to transfer all of the money from his Florida state gubernatorial campaign over to a super PAC, but not to his presidential campaign because it's going from the state to the federal level. Putting that in the super PAC has allowed, and given his woes on the candidate side, he's relying very much on that super PAC to fulfill a lot of the roles that a traditional campaign would do. The downside is he can't coordinate with the super PAC, and you're seeing some friction at times between the candidate and the campaign and the super PAC. Look, I think when you look at Scott and Haley, they seem to be headed, even though their cash on hand is very similar, they seem to be headed in opposite directions right now, both in the polling and in that cash flow. Tim Scott spent way more money than he was able to raise in the last quarter. That's come as he's at 1% and 2% in a lot of the national polling and kind of sliding a little bit in Iowa and New Hampshire where he has a little bit more support. Nikki Haley, on the other hand, is ascendant, but still way behind some of these other candidates, Trump and DeSantis, both in polling and also when it comes to the amount of money that she has for the home stretch. Certainly trending better, but well behind.
Yeah, and then break down some of the things that we've been talking a lot about, the fact that the Trump campaign raises a lot of money, but they spend a lot of money. It costs them a lot to raise the money. And then when you get outside into some of those super PACs, a good chunk of that, as much as 40% of that, seems to be going towards legal fees and bills. And if the former president were to be the nominee, if he's only spending about half of what he raises versus what President Biden will have in the coffers, that seems like a pretty significant advantage for the president.
Potentially, to the extent that former President Donald Trump is relying on the money raised through his committees, like his joint fundraising committee, to offset legal costs and things that are not related to his campaign. They said his campaign said that it had collected $45 million in the last quarter, but through his various committees. But what went into the campaign account, and that's the money that's used for core campaign activities like advertising or paying your campaign staff or polling or all the things, direct mail, digital ads, all the things that a campaign does. Only $24.5 million of the 45 that they said they raised went into that campaign side. So you're right about half the money not going over there. That certainly raises questions about his ability to compete dollar for dollar as a general election candidate if and when we get to that point. Obviously, if you're a donor to his, especially a big donor to his campaign, if the goal is to return him to the White House, you'd like to see that money spent on activities that further that as opposed to perhaps some of his legal defenses.
Yeah, and then finally give us just a little bit of a sense. You covered this in your piece, talking about some of the Senate races, which are typically big dollar events, and there are some challenges there. On the Democratic side, give us a quick sense in terms of what you see there, and is that telling us anything that we should be looking at rolling into 2024?
Yes. Look, Democrats have a very difficult map to defend. They have incumbents who are either running or still undecided about running for re-election in very Republican states like West Virginia, Montana, and Ohio. Just to take Montana and Ohio, these are states that Trump won by either high single-digit or low double-digit margins. Both Sherrod Brown in Ohio and John Tester in Montana raised at least $5 million. Some other battleground states, Bob Casey in Pennsylvania raised $3.2 million. Tammy Baldwin also raised over $3 million in Wisconsin. These are the kinds of figures and fundraising hauls that these Democratic incumbents need to post in order to really maintain, stay competitive. The challenge that they're going to have as we move into 2024 is a lot of them are facing self-funding candidates. Sherrod Brown has two self-funders running in his race. Bob Casey is running against Dave McCormick, who kicked in more than $10 million to his campaign last time and is expected to largely self-fund his campaign this time too. John Tester in Montana is facing a partial self-funder. So they're going to need this money, and especially in those really tough states. Democratic Senate incumbents have their work cut out for them. They did what they needed to do in this past quarter, but there's still a tall hill to climb.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Great perspective as always. Stephen Shepard is Politico's senior campaign and elections editor and chief polling analyst. Stephen, always appreciate your breakdown of the dollars and cents and what it's going to make sense when it comes to these campaigns rolling into 2024. Thanks for joining us.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
All right, again, that's Stephen Shepard from Politico, and the dollars add up fast, and it flies out faster how you spend it is what actually matters in the end. We'll step aside for some bottom of the hour news. More inside sources coming up next.
It's 2:30 at KSL News Radio. I'm Dan Bomas. KSL's top story this hour. Breaking news, it may have been an off-target Palestinian rocket that caused the casualties at a hospital in the Gaza area. Palestinian Health Authority and Israel's military are now blaming each other for that explosion that killed as many as 500 people at a Baptist hospital in Gaza. The Gaza officials say it was an Israeli airstrike. Israel says it was a misfired rocket from Hamas. There's no confirmation yet either way. Angry protests erupted in the West Bank city of Ramallah after reports of that Israeli airstrike that may have killed 500 people in Gaza. President Biden on his way to Israel now to hoping to meet with Palestinian authorities, although Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, has canceled his scheduled meeting. The U.S. Senate isn't waiting for a new House Speaker now to send aid to Ukraine and Israel, but ABC's Andy Field tells us that the bill won't get to President Biden without a speaker.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer saying both parties in the Senate agree they must send more aid to Ukraine and Israel. He's also warning Israeli leaders they
must minimize civilian casualties among the Palestinians.
The Senate hopes to pass a major Ukraine-Israeli aid package this week without knowing who will be the next House Speaker who might reject it. Andy Field, ABC News, Washington.
Your money at this moment. The Dow Jones average closing the trading day up just 13 points on the day, while the Nasdaq finished down 34. The S&P 500 was down less than 1 point. And it looks like we'll have sunny skies and cool temperatures finishing off the week. KSL weather is next. KSL News Time, 2:32.
Hi, Tim Hughes. Please give today to Primary Children's Hospital because miracles are happening today. The KSL Give-a-thon has begun. Donate at KSLKids.com.
Everybody has their favorites at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. People who know me know it's the ribeye steak. It is prepared perfectly. They always say, okay, Mr. Wright, what's the temperature? And I say, I want medium. And it comes out perfectly cooked medium on a sizzling hot plate. And the side dishes that go along with that ribeye steak for me, we usually get asparagus, we get the au gratin potatoes, and make sure you save room for dessert. I love their bread pudding. But again, for you, it might be a different story. And remember, it's not just about steaks at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, although they are somewhat known for that, but there's seafood and the lamb and the poultry. You're going to love the dish that awaits you at Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. Don't forget the 2 locations. What a beautiful time to go up into the Park City area, Hotel Park City, and with all the stuff happening downtown Salt Lake City, it's Ruth's Chris.
At Shields, we know that October is the time to fuel the fire for your hunting rituals. There are 43 species of deer, and the one you're chasing brings you back to the love of exciting and new outdoor adventures. So stop by Shields' sale event, which is October 14th through the 22nd, and save on your favorite brands like Mystery Ranch, Vortex, and select Shields Outfitters gear. Our experts are ready to prepare you for success on your next big game adventure. Shields, fuel your fire.
Hi everyone, it's Congressman Blake Moore here. It's been a busy fall this Congress working to address our federal debt and deficit on the House Ways and Means and Budget Committees, and meeting with constituents from across the district. My team and I have advanced legislation to balance our federal budget in 10 years, secure the border, support our airmen and women at Hill Air Force Base, counter China, and lower healthcare costs by increasing price transparency. I'm looking forward to sharing federal funding updates and more during my upcoming interactive telephone town hall. Please join me on Wednesday, October 18th at 1:30 p.m. for a teletown hall where I will take your questions and engage on topics that matter most to Utahns. Tune in on Wednesday, October 18th at 1:30 p.m. by dialing 833-305-1678. That's 833-305-1678. Learn more on my website at blakemore.house.gov. Thank you, and I look forward to talking to you soon. Paid for by official funds authorized by the House of Representatives.
Oh, I love this restaurant. Glad we got a table quickly.
What does that sign say?
Caution, wet floor?
No, right next to it.
If you are 60 or older, you may be at increased risk of serious consequences from RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, compared to adults younger than 60. Huh, I didn't know that.
Not all dangers come with warning labels. Talk to your pharmacist or doctor about getting vaccinated against RSV today. RSV vaccines, including Pfizer's, are available. Learn more at bewareofrsv.com. Brought to you by Pfizer.
Spend some time with the ones you love in the most unique dining experience in Utah. Five Alls Restaurant. 5 stars, 5 courses, history and tradition. Now open Wednesdays. Five Alls Fine Dining.
Traffic and weather together, brought to you by Granite Credit Union's new Dividend Plus checking account. Here's Josh Kitchen.
In Ogden, we have a crash where a vehicle has gone into a building that's just south of 26th Street and on Lincoln Avenue, where crews appear to have the street closed off. And in Salt Lake County, we have a crash reported that's at 690th South and 2300 East. Winter fun starts at the Utah Snowmobile Show at Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy. Snowmobiles, winter activity, and more at the Utah Snowmobile Show October 20th and 21st at Mountain America Expo Center in Sandy. I'm Josh Kitchen in the KSL Traffic Center.
KSL weather, a high of 74 today with just a few clouds, then more clouds tomorrow and a high of 69. Sunny and warmer Thursday and Friday. Right now, 71 degrees and sunny. I'm Dan Bomas, KSL News Radio, 102.7 FM, 1160 AM, and KSLNewsRadio.com. Utah's news, traffic, and weather station.
Inside Sources. Inside Sources. America's voice of reason. Boyd Matheson on Utah's home for elevated conversation. Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
I want to shift gears just a little bit during this segment, away from a lot of the big headlines of the day that we've been following in the Middle East and obviously in our nation's capital as the battle continues to go on in terms of getting a Speaker of the House of Representatives. We do expect another vote will come up later in the day today. But I want to shift to something a little off radar that I think is equally important to our conversations and to the thing that we think is most important, that is trust in the institutions of government, something that has been on the decline for many years now, in particular amongst younger citizens in this country, that their willingness to trust and have confidence in individuals and the institutions of government can be a real stress tester. And one area that used to always have the highest of ratings in both favorability and trust, the United States Supreme Court, has also been on the decline of late. Earlier this month, the Supreme Court began its new term. After the last term, you may remember, the court came under fire for a series of ethics-related questions and challenges relating to gifts and trips and so on from different members of the court. Now we want to get to what's the solution? What's the therefore what part of this whole equation? And interesting, one of the court's most junior members has been speaking publicly about the need for ethics rules. Very interesting. The justices tend not to talk about their own internal deliberations a whole lot, and they rarely speak about things that are going on amongst themselves as they have their own conversations. Well, on Monday, Justice Amy Coney Barrett spoke at the University of Minnesota Law School, and during a question and answer session, she was asked about the court possibly adopting an ethics standard. Here's what she had to say.
I think it would be a good idea for us to do it, particularly so that we can communicate to the public exactly what it is that we're doing in a clearer way than perhaps we have been able to do so far. I will say this, there is no lack of consensus among the justices. There's unanimity among all 9 justices that we should and do hold ourselves to the highest standards, highest ethical standards possible.
So the path to what that standard is, it has not been a written set of rules and guidelines over the years, but it is one that I think both those on, you can say, the left and the right side of the court, I think it is just the Supreme Court, that they all agree that coming out with something that's more definitive and more clear, easier for the public to digest and understand in terms of what they believe they should be living up to as members of the Supreme Court, the highest office in the land. Justice Amy Coney Barrett continued to give her thoughts on the role of the court and the standards that all of the justices already adhere to.
What we are thinking about, in a code of conduct is how best to express what it is that we are already doing. And we already abide by the statutes. There are a number of statutes that govern all judges, including justices. We all file our financial disclosure forms, for example, or by gift regulations. Those are statutory requirements. And then I personally, and this is true of my colleagues as well, still follow the same rules that applied to me when I was a Court of Appeals judge, the canons of conduct. There are some differences that apply to the court just by virtue of its position in the hierarchy of the judiciary. And I think, we spend, our day job is, reading statutes and seeing if Congress anticipated everything or communicated everything clearly. And so, I think we want to do a good job at that.
So it is doing a good job of that and doing it for their own behavior as well, which I think is important. We always say sunlight is the best form of disinfectant. And I think in terms of restoring that confidence and trust in the highest court and in other branches of government, I do think it's an important thing that there is some clarity there. I do appreciate the fact that Amy Coney Barrett pointed out that, look, there are a host of different statutes that all judges and justices have to adhere to. They do financial disclosures. There's a host of other rules that they have to follow, whether they're an appeals court judge or whether they're a Supreme Court justice. And so there are a host of things that are in there. They've just never really been articulated in a way that has some clarity that the public can kind of wrap their head around and say, okay, this is the standard of conduct that we're expecting from a Supreme Court justice, and it's easy to look at. It's easy to hold people accountable for living up to that. The justice was also asked about a timeline of when a written set of standards could be implemented. Here's how she described it.
Well, let's see. I think that's something that I can't really speak for the court about or make any sort of guess about that. I would just say that one thing I would want all of you all to know is that all 9 justices are very committed to the highest standards of ethical conduct. All 9 justices, and we're in agreement about what to do, and that we want to continue to follow the highest ethical standards. So any disagreement is nothing to do with either of those principles.
So that unanimity of the court in terms of making sure it's very clear in terms of what those standards are as it relates to ethics for members of the Supreme Court, I think they will attack that during the course of this particular term that, of course, will go from now all the way until June of next year. And so it will be fascinating to see how that all plays out. Now, earlier this year, you may remember we had a conversation with our friend James Wallner from the R Street Institute talking about this, because there's been a lot of call for new standards for Supreme Court justices, or a better process, or a more transparent process. And James Wallner said, look, there's really 2 paths for creating a set of ethics rules for the Supreme Court.
The court itself, the justices there, in particular Roberts, they don't want to be in this position. And so I think by taking steps as quickly as they possibly can to reassure people, then they would potentially defuse this situation. That's one option, right? That the court can take voluntary steps to change how they conduct themselves and to voluntarily comply with the code of conduct. Another alternative is for Congress to prescribe legally through statute the rules that the justices on the Supreme Court and other judges presumably have to follow in conducting their business.
And so those really are the paths that if the Supreme Court doesn't act, I am quite certain there are a number of members, particularly in the Senate Judiciary Committee, who are interested in making sure something gets done. And whether the Congress does that by statute or whether the Supreme Court does it of their own volition, that will be a very fascinating thing to watch in the months ahead and to see how the court communicates. The court is not used to having this kind of public disclosure in terms of everything that goes on in their own deliberations. It's been very different over the years. And so these calls to have a very formalized standard of ethics has been one that the court initially resisted. John Roberts, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, has said, this is our business. This is something that we need to do. We don't want this to become one more political thing to be dealt with in the House and the Senate and the White House, and trying to keep those branches of government separate. So the question will be, what does the court do? How formal is it? And is it acceptable to members of Congress and the executive branch, as well as those of us in the public? I think we all can just start from a very simple point, and I think it's the way George Washington put it best, that in all of our officials in government, that their private morality and public behavior should be congruent and should inspire confidence in the American people and command respect from those all around the world. All right, we'll step aside for one last break. When we come back, some final thoughts on Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Zero-Res Carpet and Air Duct Cleaning is offering their Friends and Family special today only. Schedule your carpet cleaning during the sale and you'll pay just $25 per room. That's right, $25 for the best no residue cleaning. Zero-Res pioneered this method, and their no soaps, no residue cleaning means your carpets stay cleaner longer. Listen, your vacuum will never get them truly clean. And quit messing around with that handheld thing. It's not doing you justice. Nothing beats a professional cleaning, and no one outcleans Zero-Res. Give yourself the best cleaning at the best price. The Friends and Family sale is on now and ends today. Just $25 per room. You don't have to clean today, but you do have to get on the schedule. Minimums and area restrictions apply. Offer valid in Salt Lake, Utah, Davis, and Weber counties only. Schedule today, online at zerores.com.
Imagine it's the last ride, but your symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome with constipation, or IBS-C, are taking you for a ride. What should you do? Keep managing your constipation with belly pain the same old way? Or try getting ahead of your symptoms by talking to your doctor about treating it with Linzess, linaclotide. Linzess is a prescription medicine that treats IBS-C in adults. It's not a laxative. It's a once-daily pill that helps you get ahead of your symptoms. It's proven to help you have more frequent and complete bowel movements and helps relieve overall abdominal symptoms, belly pain, discomfort, and bloating. These symptoms were studied in combination, not individually.
Do not give Linzess to children less than 2. It may harm them. Do not take Linzess if you have a bowel blockage. Get immediate help if you develop unusual or severe stomach pain, especially with bloody or black stools. The most common side effect is diarrhea, sometimes severe. If it's severe, stop taking Linzess and call your doctor right away. Other side effects include gas, stomach area pain, and swelling.
Imagine, what could relief from IBS-C mean for you? Talk to your doctor and say yes to Linzess. Learn more at linzess.com or call 1-800-LINZESS.
When it comes to making plans, you are the best. What about those round trips that you plan in advance, which are perfect on your way there and perfect on your way back? Or those meetings with friends for which you make a group chat 3 months before so that nobody or anything is missing? Or your daughter's first birthday party. You planned it with such dedication that instead of the first, it felt like our 15s. The same way you plan each detail for those moments. Start planning to protect you and your loved ones from a natural disaster. Sign up for local weather and emergency alerts. Prepare an emergency kit and make a family communications plan. Protecting your family is the best plan you can make. Get started at ready.gov/plan.
Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
If you have unfiled taxes or are in debt to the IRS, this is important news. The IRS just rolled out a new program to help struggling taxpayers more easily resolve their tax problems. It's called the Taxpayer Relief Initiative, and it opens up powerful new options for people looking to get back on the right track with the IRS. And no one knows this program like the professionals at Optima Tax Relief, America's most trusted tax resolution company. They've resolved over $1 billion in tax debt for their clients and have the expertise and experience to help you. One easy call to Optima can start the process, helping to put an end to your worries of wage garnishment, asset seizure, and other aggressive IRS actions. Make today the beginning of your fresh start with the IRS. Call the experts at Optima Tax Relief now for your free confidential consultation.
Call 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460. 800-343-6460.
Optima Tax Relief. Some restrictions apply. For complete details, please visit OptimaTaxRelief.com.
I'm a big believer in investing into what the wealthiest people in the world invest into. But it's not easy to know exactly what that is, and it hasn't always been possible for regular folks like you and I. But that's changing. I'm Jeff Jr. with Trajan Wealth, and if you've done a good job acquiring some assets, now is the time to consider private equity. Private equity is ownership of private companies that aren't traded on the stock market and in most cases are very exclusive. Examples could include ownership of apartments or nursing homes, dental practices, solar farms, you name it. Why do so many billionaires invest into private equity? Because of historically low correlation to the stock market and historically higher returns. If you have a goal with your portfolio but aren't there yet, call Trajan Wealth today. Call 801-899-7600. That's 801-899-7600.
Advisory services offered through Trajan Wealth, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. May require accreditation.
There's never been a better time to test drive that Hyundai you've always wanted. It's your journey. Own every mile in a brand new Hyundai. Visit buyhyundai.com or see your Utah Hyundai dealer today.
Introducing Yes Heating, Air Conditioning, Plumbing, and Electric. We're bringing all of Utah's favorite HVAC, plumbing, and electrical brands under one roof. Your home's cooling system has been working hard all summer. Make sure your heating and cooling system continues to operate at peak efficiency by scheduling a $29 seasonal HVAC tune-up now with the pros at Yes. As the seasons change, you can count on Yes to help keep your family comfortable. Call now or visit theyesmancan.com for details, terms, and conditions.
With the three things you need to know this hour, I'm Dan Bomas. First, Israel says it was a misfired Palestinian rocket that killed 500 people at a hospital in Gaza. The Palestinian Health Authority says it was an Israeli airstrike. Second, President Biden will touch down in Israel tomorrow. He's expected to show strong support for Israel, as well as backing humanitarian aid for Gaza. And third, Representative Jim Jordan failed his first vote to be Speaker of the House of Representatives after 20 Republicans voted for other candidates. 71 degrees and sunny now in Salt Lake City. And back to Inside Sources on KSL News Radio.
Hear elevated conversation on crucial issues. Boyd Matheson on Inside Sources.
Welcome back to Inside Sources here on KSL News Radio. It's great to be with you today, as always. I am Boyd Matheson, and as we come down the home stretch of the program today, we're, of course, continuing to keep our eyes on all things happening in Israel. As you've been hearing during our news cycles, the fog of war is clearly upon the region, and so you start getting a lot of claims and counterclaims in terms of what is or is not happening. And I would just remind everyone, as we enter this phase of this conflict in the Middle East, instant certainty is the enemy of truth, and it always undermines trust. And so as you hear reports, as you see big headlines, especially big sensational headlines, just pause, just take a deep breath, dig a little deeper, find an additional source, go to places that you trust to make sure that you're getting the full perspective before you have a hot take, before you shout at your neighbor of what you think is right or wrong or what did or did not happen. Because in many cases, we just do not know. I was so appreciative earlier in the program. Laura Kelly was on with us from News Nation, from The Hill, and she was talking about this very thing. She had written a piece for The Hill this morning, and a few hours later, a few of the elements of it had already been unwound. Meetings that were scheduled to happen are suddenly not happening because of what did or did not happen as it relates to the explosion at the hospital in Gaza, whether that was from Israeli planes dropping missiles or whether it was a misfired rocket that was being launched out of Gaza by terrorists. We don't know at this point. And so you have to step everything back. And so part of President Biden's trip going into Israel and some of the meetings he was hoping to have, some of those have been put on pause. Now, hopefully by the time he gets there, the fog of that part of the war will clear a little bit. There'll be some certainty in terms about what's going on and that there will be a path forward. But the thing that we all have to keep in mind, and I'll just say it once more, instant certainty is the enemy of truth, and it undermines trust. And so just restraint always works. That's a good model and a good motto for all of us. Restraint always works, and just slowing down. You don't have to have the instant hot take 24/7. You can be reflective, you can be contemplative, and most important, you can ask really good questions. Because we find out much more when we continue to ask those second and third level questions and continue to search for answers as opposed to just expressing opinions. And that's a big part of the process. All right, as we watch what's going on and not going on in our nation's capital, of course, the House of Representatives continues its search for a Speaker of the House. A round of voting took place this morning. No one made it to the requisite 217 votes required to become Speaker of the House. And so the House is currently in recess. A lot of meetings are going on. I'm hearing a lot in text messages from a lot of sources, both from members of Congress from across the country, from aides and staffers and other reporters who are all looking at what is and isn't going on behind the scenes before they take another vote. I anticipate that in the next hour or so, they will get to another vote, probably a little after 4 p.m. Mountain Time. I know there are a few members who have been out for personal reasons, a family funeral and so on, that will be getting back into Washington, D.C. That will change those numbers and dynamics just a little bit, and a lot of conversations going on. And so I want to give you just some of the latest in terms of what we are hearing out there. One representative who has been front and center on every cable news network is Representative Ken Buck from Colorado. He has mentioned that he wants Jim Jordan to come out and be very adamant about the 2020 election, what did and didn't happen. Otherwise, he's saying Republican lawmakers need to be looking somewhere else.
We have 20 Republicans sitting in Joe Biden districts right now, districts that Joe Biden won in 2020, and those 20 Republicans are going to be at risk. There's no way we win the majority if the message we send to the American people is that we believe the election was stolen, and we believe that January 6th was okay. It was a tour of the Capitol.
Ken Buck also said that he was frustrated with Jim Jordan in his oversight committee going after the Department of Justice.
It is not personal. I have a lot of respect for Jim, and we both have sort of risen in the conservative movement and share many of the values of the conservative movement. I think that what Jim Jordan needs to do is to stop talking about defunding the Department of Justice. We pride ourselves on being a party of the rule of law. You can't defund the Department of Justice or defund a special counsel's office in the Department of Justice and talk about the value that we share. So there are a number of different issues related to the election and some not related to the election.
So it's always interesting. Again, Ken Buck has been everywhere on media across the spectrum on the national level, talking about why he is not supporting Jim Jordan. There haven't been a whole lot of other members who have been in that space. And so the fact that Ken Buck has sort of become the self-appointed anti-Jim Jordan spokesperson is an interesting one to me. Not quite sure I understand that one fully, or who deputized Ken Buck to really be that player. There doesn't seem to be a whole lot of conversations going on with other people. I do want to get quickly to someone who rarely speaks to the media, Representative Thomas Massie from Kentucky. And he actually told reporters in the last hour why he thinks Jim Jordan is actually the only viable candidate left.
He's the only one who can get elected without cutting deals. Everybody, and that was the demise of Kevin McCarthy. And I supported Kevin McCarthy, but he had so many arrangements and deals that they became almost mutually exclusive. But Jim Jordan has gotten this far without a single deal, and he's got a plan to keep us from getting into a shutdown. And he's the only one who can reset the expectations that had been set earlier with conservatives. And that's why I think he's the only viable candidate we have. And I think he's going to get there this week.
Interesting perspective from Thomas Massie, a Republican from Kentucky. And very interesting. He said he was someone who supported Kevin McCarthy, but all of the deals Kevin McCarthy cut really ended up being his demise. He said if you can do it without making all those deals, you offend fewer people, you're more likely to stay in the chair or get the gavel in the first place. We'll continue to watch it all because we have you covered here on KSL News Radio. That wraps it up for Inside Sources. Thanks for joining us. And as always, as you go out into the world today,